When you hear the name Frankenstein, chances are you're picturing a big, lumbering, green-skinned monster with bolts sticking out of his neck. But Mary Shelley's original novel, oh, it's so much deeper, way more tragic, and just profoundly human. It's really a story about ambition, abandonment, and in the end, revenge. So let's dive in and deconstruct one of the greatest stories ever told.
So, our story kicks off in a pretty unexpected place. Not a Gothic castle, but out on the frozen sea, in these chilling letters from a ship captain named Robert Walton. See, he's on this incredibly ambitious trip to the North Pole when his ship gets completely trapped, surrounded by nothing but ice. And it's from this desolate, lonely world that he writes about a strange accident, setting a scene that's just dripping with isolation and mystery.
So there they are, stranded and desperate, when Walton's crew spots a sled out on the ice. They rescue the guy on it. He's near death, totally emaciated and frozen. But he's no random traveler. Turns out he was chasing someone else, a gigantic figure he'd seen gliding across the ice just before. This rescued man is Victor Frankenstein, and his harrowing story is what makes up the very heart of the novel. Okay, so how in the world did a brilliant student from Geneva end up chasing a quote-unquote monster in the middle of the Arctic? Well, to get that, we have to go all the way back to the beginning, to the ambition that started it all. This isn't just a science experiment gone wrong. It's the story of an obsession that completely consumes a man's soul. You know, the novel's subtitle actually gives us a huge clue: the Modern Prometheus. So in Greek mythology, Prometheus was the guy who stole fire from the gods to give to humanity and was then punished for all eternity. Victor Frankenstein is this modern Prometheus. He wanted to steal the secret of life itself, to cross that sacred boundary and become a creator. And just like Prometheus, he was about to face unimaginable suffering for it. Victor's path to creation wasn't some single flash of lightning in a lab. No, this was 2 solid years of relentless, isolating work. He totally cut himself off from his family, his friends, his health completely failed him. He was a prisoner of his own ambition. He even admitted to pursuing nature to her hiding places, which is a fancy way of saying he was robbing graveyards for body parts. And then, one dreary night in November, he did it. He succeeded. And right here, this is the story's first great tragedy. The very moment his creation opens its watery eyes and takes a breath, Victor isn't filled with pride. He's filled with absolute horror and disgust. The being he worked so hard to create is hideous to him. And what does he do? He runs. He abandons his creation, his child, leaving it totally alone at the very moment of its birth. This single act of abandonment is the pivot on which the entire novel turns. Victor gets sick, he recovers, and he desperately tries to forget what he's done. But there's this huge question hanging in the air. What happened to the one he left behind? Well, for a huge chunk of the novel, the story shifts to answer that exact question. So now we get to hear directly from the creature himself, and his story is just one of utter confusion and suffering. I mean, try to imagine being born as a fully grown adult, with no memory, no language, no clue what's going on. He's just bombarded by sensations he can't process, and every single human he meets reacts with fear and violence, driving him to hiding. From this little shack attached to a cottage, the creature starts secretly watching a poor family, the DeLacys. And here, he begins this incredible education. He learns about family, about love, about kindness. He learns to speak and read just by watching their lessons. He reads classic books like Paradise Lost and starts to understand human society, both its good and its bad. He literally develops a soul, only to realize he's completely, utterly alone. The creature makes a really powerful case for himself here. He insists he wasn't born evil. His first instincts were all about kindness. He even secretly helps the family he's watching. But the constant rejection, the sheer misery of his lonely existence, that's what twists his nature into something vengeful. He wasn't born a monster, he was made into one. And this is the breaking point. After months of just hoping, he finally works up the courage to reveal himself to the family's blind father, hoping his eloquent words can win him over before the others can see his terrifying face. But the children come home, and they just react with terror. Felix, the man he had come to admire, beats him violently and drives him away. His very last hope for any human connection is just shattered. This brutal rejection transforms the creature's deep sorrow into pure rage. He declares war. Not on all of humanity, but specifically on his creator, the one person responsible for his miserable life. And so begins this devastating cycle of revenge that's going to consume them both. When they finally confront each other up in the mountains, the contrast between them is just staggering. Victor only sees a demon, a fiend, a wretch. But the creature's plea is so deeply human. He compares himself to Adam, but an Adam who was abandoned by his God. He's not asking for power, he's begging for the companionship he has been so cruelly denied.
And this is when the creature makes his famous demand. His logic is cold and it's clear. His evil comes from his misery, and his misery comes from his loneliness. He says if Victor creates a female companion for him, another being just as isolated as he is, they will disappear into the wilds of South America and never ever bother humanity again.
Victor actually reluctantly agrees and travels to this remote island to start the work. But as he's looking at the half-finished female creature, he's just overcome with fear. What if she's even more malicious than the first? What if they hate each other? Or even worse, what if they have children and unleash a whole race of devils on the world? And in a moment of sheer panic, he tears the female creature to pieces as his first creation watches in horror. This is Victor's final betrayal, and the consequences are absolute. The creature, his last hope completely destroyed, makes a chilling vow. I will be with you on your wedding night. He then goes on a campaign to destroy everyone Victor loves, one by one. His best friend Henry, his wife Elizabeth, and the grief from all these losses ends up killing his father too. With everyone he ever loved now dead, Victor has only one purpose left: revenge. And this brings our story full circle, leading to this desperate, globe-spanning chase that ends exactly where we started, out in the vast, empty wasteland of the Arctic. And that's how we end up back on Robert Walton's ship. Victor, completely exhausted and broken, dies after telling his tragic story, begging the captain to continue his quest for vengeance. His life, which started with so much brilliant promise, just ends in total failure and despair.
But wait, the story isn't quite over. After Victor dies, Walton is stunned to find the creature in the cabin, weeping over the body of his creator. He's not celebrating. He's filled with remorse, confessing how much suffering his crimes caused, even him. With his creator gone, his purpose is over. All that's left is to end his own life.
And with that, the creature leaps from the ship onto an ice raft and is carried away by the waves, vanishing into the darkness and the polar mist. It's such a lonely, tragic end for a being who was brought into the world without his permission and then rejected by the very man who gave him life. And that's what the novel leaves us with, this central, haunting question. Was the true monster, the physically grotesque but intelligent and emotional creature who was driven to violence by misery, or was it his creator, the brilliant Victor Frankenstein, whose reckless ambition and complete failure of compassion unleashed all this tragedy on the world? The novel never gives us an easy answer, leaving us to decide for ourselves.